Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Welcome to Latvijas Gaze Investor Conference webinar about financial results of 9 months 2019. Today we are hosted by Latvijas Gaze Vice Chairman of the Management Board, Sebastian Groeblinghoff. As always, we will first have the company's presentation, which will be followed by questions and answers session. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Latvijas Gaze, please use the question box on the right side of your screen. All questions will be addressed after the presentation. Mr. Groeblinghoff, I invite you to start the presentation.
Great, many thanks, Eva. Shareholders, investors, analysts, good morning and a warm welcome to this webinar also from my side. Thank you for joining us today for the presentation of Latvijas Gāze Group's unaudited 9 months financial results. Let me first provide you with the agenda of this meeting. And we have prepared actually 4 items for you today. I will start giving you a quick update on the key market developments that determine the operating environment of Latvijas Gāze during the reporting period. I will then turn and present the financial results. Finally, I will share with you a brief outlook on our expectations for the remaining months in 2019. And after the presentation part, we have reserved time for answering any questions that you might have. As in previous webinars, we have also prepared 2 poll questions that we will put up for a vote during the webinar. We will get to this later during the presentation. One more note before we start with our agenda. You all know that Latvijas Gāze consolidates financial results on a group level. The JSC Gāze also publishes its own financial reports, however. And the webinar today will present financial results for the group, as well as separately for the sales and trading business operated by Latvijas Gāze. In case you are interested in more details concerning the financial position, operations, and strategy of the distribution segment, please also visit the website of the JSC Gāze for more information. So let's start with the key market developments. In our last webinar at the end of August, we explained that the mild winter as well as the collapse in hub prices were the dominating developments in the global gas market during the first half of the year. After bottoming out in July, August, market prices in August and September eventually stabilized, albeit we have to say on a comparably low absolute level. Summer-winter spreads remained healthy and supported strong storage injections across whole Europe. In contrast to previous years, demand for entry capacity into the Inčukalns underground storage exceeded the technical available injection capacity. During August, September, and October, market participants therefore faced congestion at the entry of the storage facility. Apart from gas traders, and this is interesting, and wholesalers, also large gas consumers competed for storage capacity this year to benefit from the attractive summer-winter spreads. As in the first half of the year, favorable spark spreads in the Nordic and Baltic power market on top of that supported strong gas burn in power generation also during the third quarter. On the supply side of the market, attractively priced LNG continued to flow into the region via the LNG terminal in Klaipėda, directly competing with pipeline supplies from Russia. On the demand side, competition in all customer segments remained intense, exerting pressure on sales margins. With regard to regional market integration, preparations for the creation of a single regional market zone comprising Latvia, Estonia, and Finland as of 1st February 2020 further advanced. The new market zone will further increase the competitive dynamics in the region, but it will for sure also create new opportunities for market participants. This chart once more illustrates the price development at the example of the gas pool front month price that we have seen since January 2018. And as you can see, prices dropped by more than 60% between the period October 18 and June-July 2020, but then eventually really stabilized in July, August this year. And as I mentioned, it's been on a comparably low absolute level. We've seen prices around 10 euro per megawatt hour on individual days. Prices even dropped to slightly less than 10 euro. And the drop that we have seen between October, September last year and summer this year is one of the fastest and steepest drops that we have seen in recent years. Now, what is interesting, despite this stabilization, short-term market prices remained highly volatile. And I would like to illustrate the strong within-day volatility that reached up to €1.5 per megawatt on individual trading days. And I've prepared two examples for you. The first one relates actually to a situation when EDF, the French power generator, in early September informed the market that it had identified flaws in its nuclear reactors. And at the same time, it was actually on the same day, the Dutch government went public with plans to reduce sharply the growth production next year. And as you can see, when the trading session started, prices were around €12 per megawatt hour. And about 4 hours later, prices had reached a level of almost €13.50. So this is really the price jump of €1.50 that you can see within just a couple of hours. Prices really only came down a couple of days later as the situation around the French nuclear plants cleared, but this was not the only strong price movement that we saw in September. A second event that affected the market was the attack on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia on 15 September. And this again sent prices up for almost half a day until the end of the trading session. Prices came down much faster in comparison to the event I mentioned before, simply due to the fact that the market very quickly understood that the impact on the gas market is less pronounced than in the first case. What is important to understand that this strong price volatility has an impact on our operations, and it indeed required us to increase the risk premium in the offers we made out to our customers to cover the significantly higher market risk during offer periods. If you make out an offer early in the day and you allow your customer to get back to you in the afternoon, you are simply in a situation where you have to manage the risk concerning the volatility in the market. Independent from this high short-term volatility, the summer-winter spreads remained positive during the whole summer period, and as I've already mentioned before, this has supported very strong storage injections. Now let me move from these more general market and pricing developments to sharing some comments on selected key events that affected the group during the third quarter. In July, Conexus Baltic Grid, due to technical reasons, reduced the available injection capacity at the Inčukalns underground storage by 40%. And we have already mentioned that during our last webinar in August, but this dragged on also during the summer period, and actually Conexus did not increase the injection capacity again, and this was for technical reasons. Conexus needed to protect the technical integrity of the storage facility. And for that reason, the restrictions were kept until the end of the injection season. Nevertheless, and this is the good news for Latvijas Gaze and for our customers, we managed to complete our storage injection program as we had initially planned, a bit later than originally planned, but by 10th of October, we had all the quantities that we had planned to put into storage in the storage facility. In September, Latvijas Gaze, at a high-ranking industry event, announced to support actively the development of natural gas as a fuel in transportation. And this step is part of a wider plan to develop new business segments. And at this time, there's also a discussion within the company on further strategic initiatives going forward. And finally, I'm looking into October. This is more a technical issue, but at the beginning of October, Latvijas Gaze successfully moved to its new administrative office in Aristida Briana Iela 6. The location of the customer service center, as well as the location and the legal address of the JSC Gazo, remain at 20 Vagono Street in Riga. So there's no changes on that. Let's now have a look at the sales numbers and the financials of the reporting period. I will start with a quick overview on the development of sales in the distribution as well as in the sales and trading segment before turning to the financial indicators for the group. Well, we have seen a drop in natural gas quantities transported through the gas distribution network in Latvia during the first half of 2019, but higher gas consumption during the third quarter actually pushed transported quantities in the system of Gazo through previous year's levels, almost previous year's levels. So we are 1.2% below last year's levels. The sales and trading segment had slightly stronger results on the sales side and was in total able to increase sales by 23% year-on-year. And there were three key factors driving the growth in sales. The first one, strong sales to newly acquired customers in Estonia. This was mainly during the first quarter of 2019, and we've already mentioned that during our webinar in August. The second is the strong gas demand from the power generation segment that was triggered by the positive spark spreads in the Nordic and Baltic power markets, as well as by relatively low water levels in River Daugava. And the third reason actually was the large customers injecting significant gas quantities into the Inčukalns storage to benefit from the positive summer-winter spreads. So how did these numbers now affect the group's net turnover, EBITDA, and net profit? The group's net turnover for the 9 months period increased by 1%. That means effectively stayed almost stable in comparison to 2018. And this actually accounts for both segments. So the turnover for both segments was more or less stable. However, we have to say that EBITDA dropped by almost 48% year-on-year, and net profit fell even stronger and was 85% lower than at the end of the same period before. The reasons for this significant drop relate mainly to the sales and trading segment, which is operated by Latvijas Gaze. And therefore, I would like to share some more detailed explanations on the results of Latvijas Gaze and the sales and trading segment. Due to the significantly lower market prices that I have just shown a couple of minutes ago, the net turnover of the sales and trading segment does not reflect the growth in our sales volumes. And on top of that, we had several unfavorable factors that already resulted in negative earnings during the first half of the year, and these factors continued to weigh heavily on the sales and trading segment's results at the end of the 9 months period. However, as projected during our last webinar at the end of August, Latvijas Gaze managed to reduce the operating loss in comparison to the first 6 months. Overall, the loss diminished from 4.1 million euro posted after the first half of 2019 to 3.1 million euro at the end of the reporting period. Let me once more recap on the factors that had the strongest impact on the financial results of the sales and trading segment and how this impact has developed since the last reporting date. For your orientation, we have again included Harvey balls in the chart, and they indicate the negative weight of each factor on the financial results. The first factor relates to the mild winter and the drop in market prices. Despite the strong sales to Estonia during the first quarter of 2019, the unusually mild core winter months left the sales and trading business with a significantly higher than planned volume of natural gas in the Inčukalns storage at the end of the winter season. Due to the rapidly falling market prices, the cost of the gas injected into the storage during the third quarter in 2018 increasingly became a financial burden for the company. At a certain moment, margins for gas supplied from the storage turned negative. Our hedging activities prevented that the loss from this unplanned development was not even higher. But the issue is that the negative impact of this effect on the annual result is a structural one and will not be reversible. So that is really something we will see as an effect on our overall results also at the end of the year. The second factor relates to mark-to-market losses from financial derivatives. Despite positive income from financial derivatives that settled during the reporting period, mark-to-market losses on open financial derivatives for gas deliveries starting as of November 2019 put a further strain on the segment's half-year financial performance. In line with IFRS accounting rules, the group recognizes unrealized gains and losses on financial derivatives at fair value through profit and loss. Due to the stabilization of market prices and further income from settled hedges during the third quarter, the negative impact on the operating result slightly diminished in comparison to the 6 months period. With physical deliveries to customers during November and December picking up and getting larger, we clearly expect this effect to further and more significantly reverse during the remaining months of the year. The third factor that weighed on the financial results were sales contracts prematurely terminated by customers. And again, this is something I already mentioned during our last webinar in August. Because of the continuously falling market prices, several customers of the company that had closely fixed price contracts terminated their contracts before the start of deliveries. Paying the termination fee and closing a new contract seemed to be more commercially attractive for those customers than continuing on the existing terms and conditions. The problem for Latvijas Gaze at this end, however, was that the penalties paid by the customers were not sufficient to cover the true losses that we incurred from the premature termination of these contracts, and that essentially then resulted in significant losses. As a response to this situation, we recently reviewed and updated our contract termination conditions to the extent possible within the existing framework of competition laws and market regulations. Despite these countermeasures, unfortunately, the loss incurred from these terminated contracts again represents a structural loss that cannot be reverted until the end of the year. Now, finally, while earlier than planned storage bookings had negatively weighed on the sales and trading segment's financial results for the first half of 2019, respectively lower costs in the third quarter contributed to reducing the operating loss after the 9 months period. And this is actually what we forecasted and also materialized then during this period. Apart from these effects, and apart from the reversal starting to kick in, slightly improving the financial results for Q3, we also managed to improve the operating results through additional cost savings, as well as additional sales deals that initially had not been foreseen in the general budget for 2019. Now, despite the weak operational result for the 9 months period, Latvijas Gaze Group maintains a healthy balance sheet and also a strong liquidity position. And you can see from the numbers, the debt to equity ratio, as well as the current ratio for the group, as well as for Latvijas Gaze, even slightly improved in comparison to the year end 2018. And for those of you who still have the numbers of last year in mind, 18 actually was a very strong year, where the sales and trading segment posted a net profit of roughly 14 million euro. Still, to support our liquidity position, Latvijas Gaze has in place a revolving credit facility with a borrowing capacity of up to 50 million euro. And this current overdraft agreement with the Latvian branch of OP Bank covers the period from 1st June 2019 until May 2021. To actively monitor and manage the liquidity risk, we continuously improve our internal cash planning tools and instruments to really make sure that we don't get into any difficult waters with regard to this topic. Now, at this moment, it's time for our first poll question, and it's actually a question that allows us a bit to reflect how you perceive the information we have published on Wednesday and I have presented today. And the question reads as follows: observing the current performance indicators of the JSC Latvijas Gaze, what would you do as a shareholder of the company? Buy additional shares, sell the shares, or continue observing? So I would read again the question and then ask you to give your feedback. Observing the current performance indicators of JSC Latvijas Gaze, what would you do as a shareholder of the company? Buy additional shares, sell the shares, or continue observing? We very much appreciate your feedback on this question, and it will help us, of course, to understand a bit better how you as shareholders, potential investors, currently view the organization. I think this should have been enough time for you to provide an answer. So let me move on with a short outlook for the full year 2019. Overall, we can say that the European gas industry seems to be well prepared for the upcoming winter season, and the currently healthy filling level of the Inčukalns underground storage for sure bolsters the physical supply security in the Baltic region for the winter period. However, looking a bit more on the European level, some uncertainties concerning potential supply shortages remain. The pending transit conflict between Ukraine and Russia that is not yet settled, temperature developments in Europe and Asia, and uncertainties around the gas production in the Netherlands are for sure the main factors that need to be mentioned in this context. At the moment, at least with regard to temperatures, it does not yet look like an extraordinarily cold winter, but we are still at the beginning of the winter period, and we need to observe what is going to happen in the next months to come. Independent from these factors, we expect that market prices in general will remain rather volatile, with stronger price jumps conceivable in case of physical supply shortages, and that will strongly depend on the potential events and developments I've just mentioned. Looking a bit to the financial results for the group, we clearly expect, and we are fully committed also to improving the sales and trading result during the remaining months of the year. The cost savings program that we have initiated at the end of 2018 to bring down our operating expenses in 2019 by 15% year on year is well on track. And as mentioned before, we project that the mark-to-market losses will continue to reverse due to the income from physical supply contracts starting as of late October, early November. And in combination and based on our portfolio optimization strategy, we expect to generate healthy profits during November and December in the sales and trading segment. And this will really help us to significantly improve the result of the sales and trading segment until the end of this year. So in a nutshell, we can say, despite the operational loss incurred by the segment during the 9 months period, we project a positive full year result for the sales and trading segment, as well as on the group level as such. So this is the clear take we have for the remaining months of the year. Now, based on this information, we would like to bring in the second poll question. And the second poll question relates to the strategy of Latvijas Gāze. And we would like to get your feedback on how understandable and clearly defined the strategy of Latvijas Gāze is. So the question reads as follows. In your opinion, has the JSC Latvijas Gāze a clearly defined and understandable strategy? Yes, no, or there's also the option to answer partially. I will read out the question once more. In your opinion, has the JSC Latvijas Gāze a clearly defined and understandable strategy? Yes, no, or partially. Again, many thanks for your support and for answering the question. That would actually leave me to a more technical issue at the end of my presentation today. I would like to draw your attention to our financial calendar for 2020. It has also been published on Wednesday, 27th of November, but I again would like to share it with you. We plan to publish the unaudited financial statements for the 12 months period of 2019 on the 26th of February 2020, and the audited full year financial statements will follow on April the 1st. And trust me, this is not going to be an April joke, but we are very serious about publishing our results on that date. And as you can see from the graph or from the chart, the full financial calendar with regard to the publication of all the quarterly financial reports. And this is also publicly available on the Latvijas Gāze website, as well as on the website of Nasdaq Riga. Well, essentially, that is what I, in a nutshell and very briefly, wanted to share with you today from our side. And I'm happy to take any questions that might be on the floor.
Very good. Thank you, Sebastian. We do have 2 questions that were submitted before the webinar. So I'll proceed with the first one. During the second quarter 2019 conference call, you noted that due to technical reasons, injection capacity to Inčukalns underground storage was reduced by 40%. At this point, based on technical trading information, European gas prices seem to have bottomed in August and are resuming uptrend. I would like to ask if Latvijas Gāze took full advantage of European gas prices being at their decade low and was able to fill Inčukalns underground storage up to 100%.
Yeah, many thanks for the question. I think it's a fairly good one, and parts of the question I hope to have answered during my presentation already. Indeed, prices have stabilized in August, September, as I've shown also with the graph, but the summer-winter spreads really remained very healthy. And I think not only Latvijas Gāze, but any trader in the market tried to utilize this to the best extent possible. I've also mentioned that we could complete our storage program as we have planned it. Indeed, the limitations and the congestions at the Inčukalns storage site limited the possibility to even exploit this spread further. But overall, we are on our side on track and on plan. And we have booked actually our capacities also relatively early in the year, and that gave us a slight advantage maybe to other traders who waited a bit longer, because the spread was not really so obvious at the beginning of the year, but it only started to really materialize and get transparent around April, May, so shortly before the storage season started. And having booked a bit earlier also allowed us really to get into the storage the quantities that we had initially planned. I hope this sort of is a satisfying answer to the question.
Thank you. Sounds so. What are your projections on gas consumption the coming winter? Please elaborate in 3 aspects in relation to, first, available water levels in reservoirs for electricity generation, second, anticipated winter temperatures and heating, and third, other factors that you find significant.
Yeah, that's a very tough one indeed, and I wished I had a crystal ball to be able to answer that question as precisely as possible. Again, I have tried to touch these questions during my presentation, but it's essentially something we can't really predict in detail. What we usually do, we have certain planning scenarios. So we would look into what we call a normal winter. This is consumption that we have calculated based on historical data that we have collected over the years. Then we have something that we call a cold winter or a mild winter. So there's these different scenarios. At the moment, it looks like, at least temperature-wise, that we are more in a normal to mild winter scenario. But again, it's very early in the winter season, and we have already seen cases in the past where the winter started mild in November and December and then really got a lot colder during January and February. So remains to be seen. Making any serious projection or forecast on the temperatures is simply not possible and would also not be something really sound and serious. So we observe this, of course, but it's not possible to make any prediction. What I can say, we are prepared for all of these scenarios, so our customers don't have to be afraid in case of a cold snap, but we will likewise be able to deal with a milder winter in terms of having some excess quantities at the end of the winter. With regard to the electricity generation, our view is that most likely the demand in power generation will normalize a bit going forward, because we have really seen an extremely strong year, and it was a combination of 2 factors. It was not a super dry year, but it was a year where we didn't see so much hydropower, but at the same time we had these very strong and healthy spark spreads at the Nordic and Baltic power exchanges. So the expectation is that the demand will probably go down a bit in this segment, so not being as strong as this year. But again, it's very difficult to make a precise forecast on that. The other factors that can have an influence I mentioned, and this is more something that would affect the price side. Depending on how the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia, the transit conflict between Russia and the Ukraine develops, this could have an impact on short-term prices. Again, it's not really directly affecting the physical supply situation in the Baltic countries, but we will more see this coming into our region via the price signals. So that's the view that we have on these questions, and yeah, I'm happy sort of to take any more comments or questions on this.
Thank you. Indeed, we have one more question online, so I'll read it out loud now. Could you please one more time present the portfolio optimization strategy? What were the main steps taken?
You may, of course, understand that I will not disclose the full details of our portfolio strategy because that's sort of the core of our commercial activities. But indeed, what we try to do is we try to optimize, of course, all the possibilities that you have in the region. So there's pipeline supply, there's storage, there is potentially also for any trader the possibility to access the LNG terminal in Klaipėda. And we would actually take into consideration all factors, and then based on this put together our optimization strategy. We follow prices. I mentioned that we booked our storage capacities early in the year. From what we sense, there probably have not been so many traders doing it in 2019. And we have been doing good on this. It was sometimes also taking a market view, and which is pretty normal for any trading company. So this is elements of how we structure our portfolio. But please again understand that I would not go beyond this simply as this is the core of our commercial activities.
Thank you. At this point, all questions are answered. We have recorded the webinar and the recording will soon be available in company's announcements. Mr. Groeblinghoff, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the answers given. Participants, thank you for joining. See you during the next webinar.
Yeah, many thanks, and thanks for bearing with us today. Have a nice weekend.